Hey friends, SGT here, and on the line is the one and only Andy Hoffman from MilesFranklin.com, a man who I've been dying to talk to for quite a bit of time here, especially since the quote-unquote government shutdown. Andy, welcome back.
Thank you very much. I have been dying to speak to you as well.
Oh, seriously, man. All right, so here's the deal, guys. Just a little background. My machine, my MacBook Pro, crashed and my hard drive went down. I lost an interview with Doug Hummel, who I was going to post on Sunday night, and I lost that interview. It's gone, so my apologies to Doug. We will get him back on. And Andy, here's the thing, man. I got to tell you, going back to that government shutdown, you know the night where it seemed like all hell was going to break loose if these guys didn't come to an agreement? Of course, I always thought they would, but I woke up at 2:45 in the morning and I could not get back to sleep. And the reason for it was I felt like this government shutdown really showed us how dire the situation will be when the real collapse comes. And it just made me realize at 2:45 in the morning that day that we really truly could see a collapse beyond what any of us dreamed possible. They could really bring people in this nation to their knees.
Well, the way I look at it is that they're just a bunch of Keystone cops. They have no grand plan. They're morons. They wake up every day trying to kick the can for another day. And, you know, this isn't the first time this happened. This happened in 2011 with the super committee and then the Budget Control Act. And then this year with the fiscal cliff. They created the No Budget, No Pay Act. Of course, we still have no budget and we're paying. The fiscal cliff deal was actually called the American Taxpayer Relief Act, even though they raised taxes for everybody. We have the continuing appropriations deal, 2014, which really just it kicked the can further. But people, we use that term "kick the can" as if it's some ubiquitous thing that it's meaningless. Look. I mean, the Chinese government is vocally saying we need to de-Americanize the world. We need to have a new currency. They're buying gold left and right, and it's a very big deal. And most importantly, I wrote about this last week for everyone. This is very, very big news for people who haven't actually seen this. Buried deep inside of this deal last week, not mentioned by anyone in the mainstream media, is the fact that they created a little clause that says, when we get to that February 7th new debt ceiling deadline, any legislation that's proposed can be vetoed by the president, meaning no matter how they try to cap the debt, he can veto it. And the only way to override it is with a two-thirds majority in both the House and the Senate. This is something that will never happen. So in effect, we've effectively gotten rid of the debt ceiling forever.
It's interesting. I know about that. And just getting back to what you were saying about China being very vocal about de-Americanizing, I want to share this with everybody. China's Daigong credit downgrades the U.S. sovereign credit ratings. And Andy, I just want to read this to you. They wrote in their report, Andy, and I think this is just the absolute antithesis to anything you'd hear on CNBC. They wrote, and I quote, "For a long time, the U.S. government maintains its solvency by repaying its old debts through raising new debts, which constantly aggravates the vulnerability of the federal government's solvency. Hence, the government is still approaching the verge of default crisis." Now, Daigong goes on to cite 5 specific reasons that supports that conclusion, and they're startling. So, if you are paying attention and you're outside of the United States and you're not listening to CNBC, you know what the truth is. This endless debt ceiling, whatever they're doing, doesn't fix a thing. It's just, as you say, kicking the can down the road, but not even for a year, not even for 6 months. I mean, what do we get out of this? 2 months? 3?
That's right. It's not even that. Remember, December 13th is when the equivalent of the super committee has to come up with they call it a long-term spending plan, but it's a budget. We haven't had a budget 5 years, and December 13th they're not going to come up with anything, and then they're going to go on vacation for a month, and they're going to come back, and we'll be right up against the next January 15th shutdown date, which they can't avoid unless they get a budget. Of course, they won't get a budget, so something dire is going to happen. And the whole world is watching. I mean, Daigong is a big deal. Daigong is no Standard & Poor's. They are really striving to be a completely independent agency. And believe me, there's more people in the world now that are reading Daigong than are reading Standard & Poor's. The Chinese know exactly what we're doing. The Chinese know about the gold manipulation, which is why they're buying the physical hand over fist. And, it's only a matter of time before this game ends. It's not a matter of they can just keep kicking and kicking and kicking, because now it's at the point where the dollar is I mean, to watch the dollar plummeting to a 2-year low when Europe is on the verge of falling apart and Japan is doubling its money supply shows you that the world is terrified of dollars. And, this game can only go on for so much longer.
You just wrote recently, the debt ceiling to infinity is here, and the end of the Constitution. Do you feel that way because of the provisions that they've buried in this debt ceiling deal that they won't even reveal? You write in this article that the mainstream media really won't even publish any of the details, and you've really had a hard time digging in and finding the details. I know Nancy Pelosi said within the last 48 hours or 72 hours, I know recently Nancy Pelosi said, who cares? What does it matter what was in it? Just like she said with Obamacare, we need to pass the bill so we can read what's in it. These people are nuts. I mean, are they not paying attention to what Degong is saying? Are they not paying attention to what China is saying, to what the rest of our creditors are saying? Are they that out of touch with reality?
Well, yeah, and yeah, the article I wrote was referring specifically to that clause that the president can now veto any challenges to the debt ceiling. As for Nancy Pelosi, I mean, she has some of the most insane quotes of any of these people. She said there's nothing left to cut in the budget. So, well, how are we going to have a budget if before we're starting there's nothing left to cut? And of course, they haven't cut anything to start with. I mean, they were going to have the super committee was supposed to get $2 trillion. They got zero. Then they settled on 150 billion with the Budget Control Act. They cut the fiscal cliff down to 85 billion, and now they've cut it down to less than 50 billion. And now they say they got nothing left to cut. And yet the debt, for all the hype about the deficit reduction, has gone up another $1 trillion this year, and it's going to go up another trillion next year. And remember, interest rates are now starting to rise. And the Chinese, as we saw today with today's tick report, are again selling treasuries, which means the Fed has to monetize more. And again, remember, I was one of the few people that said there would be no tapering. Today I see Goldman Sachs says no tapering until March. How about that? People, there will never be tapering. And I continue to say that QE5 is much closer than people think. And when QE5 was announced, Google the day the dollar died. It's a great video that Future Money Trends put out years ago. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Well, it all scares the hell out of me because the way I look at it, Andy, at this point is everything that we've been talking about now. You and I have known each other for a few years here. And everything that we've been talking about in the alternative media is now staring us straight back in the face. And I just want to get back to this idea that we have seen over the edge of the cliff. We've seen the precipice. We've seen how disastrous and nightmarish our future in this country could be when the ultimate collapse comes. Right? And I just want to share this with you guys. This was our friend Max Slavo over at shtfplan.com, and he wrote, government freezes EBT funds, orders states to withhold transfers to food stamp recipients. Now, you guys all know that when there was the EBT shutdown, people freaked out, and then there was talk that, Section 8 housing would be, those people would all be evicted from their homes because the November checks wouldn't come. Andy, do you find this whole thing to just be a little insulting at this point to our intelligence? Because with all the talk of the shutdown, the only thing that was shut down in the government were the monuments people wanted to visit and the national parks and the Grand Canyon. And meanwhile, the Pentagon and the White House were open for business as usual.
Well, yeah, it's a credibility thing. As it turns out, only 10% of the government was actually closed. They considered everything essential, but really because, we are now a dependency nation. They cannot shut the government down. Government, like fiat currency, is a Ponzi scheme. Big government, when it grows, it needs to keep growing bigger because people depend on it. Only 10% of the government shut down. And then it turns out part of this deal that they made last week was to give back pay for everyone who was shut down. So in effect, it wasn't shut down at all. And as it turns out, a lot of the people were collecting unemployment. So as it turns out, they got a 2+ week vacation and got paid more for not working than they got paid for working. I mean, this is a completely dysfunctional nation right now. And yes, something very tragic is going to happen around that January time because they're not going to have a budget. And I don't see how they can avoid a government shutdown unless one of these executive decrees comes in play.
Well, I feel like the shutdown whether it was an exercise in folly or whether it was really a false flag of sorts, or whether everything we saw was actually organic and it wasn't contrived. I'm not really sure about that, but it felt like a Pavlov's dog event. It felt like a training event for the populace, right? Because what they were trying to do was teach us all, especially the sheeple, that, Daddy Federal Government is your great benefactor. And the minute you try to shut down Daddy Fed, all these bad things happen. You lose your food stamps, you lose your Section 8 housing, you lose your handouts, you lose access to your parks, you lose access to your monuments, you lose access to... But meanwhile, the government kept operating, and there was no outrage about that. Again, in this country, very little outrage, and this government seems to be able to get away with anything it wants. And that, to me, is the most outrageous thing of all.
Well, it's because they've been successful in their, the final tool, the final arrow in their quiver is just the all-out money printing, market manipulation, and propaganda blitz. It's been going on. Well, I mean, they've been using all these tools for the past decade. But really, it started earlier this year, with the attacks in April on gold and silver. It's been nonstop like I've never seen before. The stock market's not allowed to go down. The bond market's not allowed to go down. Gold's not allowed to go up. I saw yesterday, I said, why are they expecting 185,000 jobs to have come out in August? I go, where would they even come up with this stuff? It makes absolutely no sense. But they want to just keep telling you everything's okay. The fact is, it's not okay. Another new low in the labor participation rate. And there was also a horrible job quality. I mean, people are really in big trouble here. The entitlement nation is only getting larger. And, you can only go so far with manipulating the Dow, because the reality is the world economy is falling apart.
Well, let me ask you this then about the Dow. People say a lot, where's the inflation? All we see right now is deflation, and all you people that have been talking about inflation and hyperinflation and guys like John Williams and people like James Turk, you're all wrong, because it's just a deflationary economy, and that's all we're going to see. And my response to that is all the inflation is in the stock market. That's where all this money is going, is directly into the stock market, Andy.
Yeah, it's going on worldwide. I wrote about it this week. I mean, the best example is Venezuela, because Venezuela, I mean, we use the word hyperinflation ubiquitously, but they really are going through that right now. I mean, this is a nation that's completely collapsing, and there's no way of underestimating it. And their stock market is up 350% this year. This is what happened in Weimar Germany in the early stages. Of course, in the later stages, as it turns out, the stock markets massively underperformed the cost of living and certainly the price of gold. So, of course, back then they didn't have PPTs around the world supporting the stock markets like we do. But this is the early stages right here. The money is flowing into the capital markets. That doesn't help the retail, because retail participation is at record lows right now. This is just the government's algorithms and the big banks that get the money that are benefiting from this. But as for the cost of living, remember, it's not just America, it's the whole world. Remember, I wrote that piece a few weeks ago called The Most Important Article I Ever Wrote, showing how the average currency around the world is down 30% in the last 2 years. We are seeing massive inflation worldwide, particularly in the fragile 5 nations of Indonesia, India, Brazil, Turkey, and oh my God, I always forget that 5th one. Well, I'll get it later. But the point is, in Egypt, why do you think they had the war over there, the revolution? It's because of the exported inflation, particularly since the late 2011, when the Fed embarked on Operation Twist and then QE3 and QE4. Inflation is everywhere around the world. And by the way, certain things may not be higher in the States, but generally speaking, I just read the standard of living index in the States is down to a 2-year low, and the cost of living is at a record high. So, it's there, and around the world, it's a lot more powerful right now. But eventually, as I say, the cancer will go, right through the entire body and get to the brain, which is the dollar.
Well, we talk about inflation. We talk about the stock market going higher. One other thing that's higher now too is the national debt, which recently topped $17 trillion. And I found it interesting. I'm sure you caught this too. Do you remember how the Treasury was telling us that the national debt had topped, and for months and months it sat just below the debt ceiling? And then the debt ceiling deal goes through the other day, and the U.S. debt jumps $328 billion in one day. What does that tell you?
Well, that's exactly what I said would happen. This is no different than what happened in 2011. They had the same issue. They needed to buy some time, so they do what's called extraordinary measures. I've been writing about them for months. One of them I wrote, I wrote about Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, how they give dividends from Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae to the government and say that that's money, when the fact is it's just taken from Peter to pay Paul. And ultimately, they had to pay that back. There were other extraordinary measures like taking from the national pension plans. They did the same thing in 2011. And I said there's going to be a $300+ billion increase in the debt the day that that debt ceiling is raised, which is exactly what happened. Meanwhile, for the last 3 months, we've been listening to these idiots in the mainstream media and the government saying, well, look, the deficits are down this year. No, they're not. They had a debt ceiling that was frozen at 16.7 trillion. And while they created all this extra debt for the past 3 months, they just hit it through accounting shenanigans. As it turns out, we're at 17.1 trillion. So what do you know? Another trillion year deficit, $1 trillion deficit this year. And next year, we're going to have average interest rates higher and a weaker economy and higher taxes on top of that. So where do you think we're going to be with the deficit next year? It's just so transparent to the rest of the world right now, which is why the Chinese are now starting to sell treasuries. Remember, the Fed owns 32% of the entire treasury market. The Chinese are next with 15%, and they are selling. The Japanese have 15%, and they are at best holding and possibly selling. There's no one left to buy, which is why they're going to be announcing QE5 a lot sooner than people can imagine.
Well, that brings me to a couple of final points here. Being that there is no more money left to spend in this nation, the government is bankrupt and everyone around the world knows it, and the Federal Reserve is the entity that is really providing the livelihood for the federal government to continue day in and day out. Where in the heck do you think the money is going to come from, Andy, for this Obamacare? I mean, is it just beyond the pale to you that there is a swath of Americans that actually believe they're going to get free health care out of this thing?
Where's the money going to come for anything? We talk about the food stamps. Well, first of all, the bigger problem with food stamps is going to be when they're worthless as opposed to when they're frozen. But the same goes for all these entitlement programs. Where is the money coming from? Obamacare is just one of another. Where's the money going to come from Medicaid? Where's it going to come for our new wars if we want to bomb Syria or Iran or who knows what? There is no money left. In fact, there hasn't been for years, which is why we have 17 trillion in debt, plus 5 trillion of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac debt, which is off balance sheet, plus 200 trillion of unfunded liabilities that are multiplying by the minute. So the only place it's coming from is the Federal Reserve printing press. How long the Ponzi scheme can keep going and the confidence will stay up in the dollar enough to allow it to keep spending, I don't know, but I assure you it's a lot less than people think.
Well, okay, here's my final question for you then. As we circle back on this idea of having been able to look over the cliff, I've brought this up now. This is the third time in the interview I've brought this up, and I don't know why it had an emotional impact on me, but do you feel, as you look in your crystal ball ahead, we talk about the collapse, we talk about the human toll that is going to take, after seeing what the government threatened to do with this latest shutdown, which was keep the Pentagon open but turn the food stamps off, which was to continue to beat the war drums and to operate in the criminal Congress and yet threaten to turn off the Section 8 housing. What does your crystal ball say about how bad the collapse will be for those people who are absolutely dependent on this government for their day-to-day sustenance when those switches are flipped off?
I mean, you pretty much summed it up right there. I mean, no, I don't have a crystal ball other than to say that hyperinflation or even just accelerated inflation is enough to cause social unrest everywhere. Look what's going on in Egypt. In Brazil, they had the riots. In Turkey, all these places. India, where the currency is crashing and the government is doing these insane things. I mean, anything could happen. But the fact is, look, what is it? 40% of America has less than $1,000 of savings. I mean, there's so many people that are vulnerable right now. And, frankly, my goal is to get 1 or 2% of the population to listen before it's too late.
Yeah, and you've certainly been moving pen and paper and mountain to try to get people to understand this, as you wrote in Penultimate Deal with the Devil. You describe these entitlements, these endless entitlements that have turned our nation into a dependency nation. And I think that is just the saddest part at the end of the day. Unlike in the Great Depression, when the SHTF happened during the Great Depression, 90% of our culture was an agrarian culture. Yeah, farmers, people that could provide for themselves. Now 90% of the people in this population, 95%, are absolutely unable to fend for themselves, do not live on farms, and are all corralled in these Agenda 21 big cities. When the SHTF happens this time, we are just going to be in a world of hurt.
And remember, it's a worldwide phenomenon. There's nothing doomsday about what I'm saying. I'm saying the world is going to share in the pain for allowing the U.S. to turn off the gold standard in 1971. Everyone has just piggybacked. All these central banks have allowed this to happen, and that's why the debt is going parabolic everywhere. Everyone is going to feel the pain, and that includes the Chinese, by the way. Before we get the new currency sometime in the future, which clearly the Chinese will have a big part of because they have all the gold, they too are going to see their fiat currency crash and social unrest and all these things. And so, I tell people to prepare in every possible way for the worst and hope for the best, because when currencies collapse, it's ugly. And when the entire world's currencies collapses, it will be unprecedented.
Okay, Andy, final question then. What is the answer? We've covered everything now here today, and as far as solutions go, when you're sitting in the catbird seat, what are the solutions? I do think you need some food stores, you need some precious metals, you need some guns and ammo to be able to protect yourself against and your family against a worst case scenario. But what are the answers? There are no simple answers left, are there?
No. I mean, you just have to prepare, and that's all. I'm not saying I'm not doomsday prepper. I'm saying, what do you think people will happen when currencies lose value? There will be shortages of real items of value, which include food, of course, which include energy, and certainly which include, quote, money that spends. So you have to be prepared for it. And, it could be something that starts tomorrow. It could be something that's a year or two away, but it's coming. And if if you're too early, what's the big deal? Better early than never.
And I said that was our last question. This is really the last question. I'd be remiss not to talk about precious metals, gold and silver, especially since you just recently wrote the article, Death of the World's Largest Silver Mines. What are you seeing right now with silver in the very low 20s, very reasonably priced, in my opinion, at 22 and change? What are you guys seeing in terms of demand, and what is your prognosis for the next 12 months for the price of silver?
Well, yeah, I mean, that article was highlighting the depletion of some of the largest mines in the world. But, and I give some credence to the work of Steve St. Angelo of SRS Rocco. He's amazing. He has shown how the cost of production for silver is somewhere between, I'd say, $27 and $30 per ounce on a worldwide basis. So each day that passes, more of the industry is going to get killed. And we are going to see, I still believe we're going to see 15 to 25% production declines in both gold and silver over the next couple of years because of what the cartel has done. Now, what have we seen at Miles Franklin? It's interesting because, yes, I mean, business is slightly better than it was over the summer, but it's still down dramatically from where it was in the spring. Americans right now are so complacent, it's beyond belief. Meanwhile, in China, in the East, they have record, and I mean record demand. If Miles Franklin China was operating right now, we'd be off the charts. It would be as busy as we were in April, which was our busiest month in 24 years of business. Right now, what you are seeing is an incredible disparity between the East and the West. And of course, it'll be back in the West at some point. You'll see a frenzy of buying like we had earlier this year, like we had in 2011 and certainly 2008. It's just a matter of time before people wake up. But right now, I'd say most people are still asleep.
Well, Andy, thanks again for your time. We're doing this call late in the evening. We typically do our calls on Saturdays or Sundays, and I really appreciate you taking your time away from your family and taking time to share your insights with us here at SGT Report.
Absolutely. There is nothing more important than alerting the world right now.
All right, my friend, and tell people where they can find you on the internet and how to buy some precious metals from you guys.
Yes, milesfranklin.com, one of the largest bullion dealers in America. We've been around 24 years. 800-822-8080. Or you can email me at ahoffman@milesfranklin.com.
All right, Andy, thank you very much, and you take care of yourself, and let's keep in touch.
You too.